A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Evening Review. My name is Toivan Jabela, your host. Tonight on the platform, we are joined by Dr. Sean Whittaker. He's he is a clinical psychologist. I hope I got it correct. And we are here really just to unpack, social issues, mental health issues, and how many of these things that are happening in our country right now may be linked to that. So, Doc, such a pleasure really having you. It's the first time that I've met you in person, but I've followed your work for so many years. So it's really a pleasure having you here on the platform. I think the first question really is, just the depressing news. Those of us who are in the media, every day we stumble upon these stories about people, taking their own lives, what I fear most, for example, is whether us emerging out of the pandemic might be wearing down on us now, and it is manifesting into some of these things.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Yes. It's really an honor to be here. And I obviously also follow your editorials quite keenly every day. So thank you for having me. It's obviously my favorite topic. Yes, we unfortunately do have a mental health crisis. I mean, I think it is reflected in the suicide rate of the country. And I think that's, for me, certainly, the main reason why I've always been interested in the topic of suicide, because it reflects that general crisis that we are dealing with. And as you know, for so many years, Namibia has had an elevated suicide rate. And of course, it is, if you look at the research consistently in all the countries, it is linked to the economic situation, in particular in Namibia. If you look at the statistics, it's normally young adults, 20 to 29 years old, who are unemployed, who are committing suicide, hanging themselves. So it's quite a depressing topic, but I think we need to understand it to, see the broader picture, and also in terms of interventions, of course. But that's really the gist of it, that we have these young adult males unemployed who really, feel alienated. They have no purpose in life. They feel like a burden to their families. And very often, instead of suffering for years and years and, feeling that you are simply in the way of your family, that you make it worse for them, people unfortunately take their lives. And, so we do sit with a tremendous crisis. If you look at suicides amongst our teenagers, it's a very different clinical picture. Normally, it's about the breakup of a relationship. It's about not doing well in an important exam in school, and having a real sense of shame about it. With teenagers, it's very spontaneous, normally when they commit suicide. There's very often no warning sign. But we do have a problem amongst our teenagers as well. I very often say to families, you have to be able to recognize the situation if you are going to prevent a suicide, breakup of a relationship. When you fall in love for the first time, it's magical, it's fantastic. You feel you can't live without that person, but those high school romances tend to last a month or two, and then you sit with a broken heart. Or you don't do well at the end of grade 12 or grade 11, and you feel so ashamed, and you want to get rid of the sense of shame. They don't necessarily want to die because it's obviously very permanent, but they feel so ashamed. So families need to at least be able to see, what could be those triggers. But of course, with the grown-ups, that's really where the crisis is, and that is what we need to be talking about.
And that is exactly. I mean, I want you to engage me actively, Doc, on the issue of relationships, the romantic relationships, because there is where we seem to have a lot of such incidents. Men saying, if she can't be with me, then she can't be with anyone else. So they either kill themselves or kill their partner, or both. What are the intricacies of breakups? This romantic thing, so much that this affinity that is so hard to break off.
Look, I think it's the broader issue of patriarchy. That we sit with a very toxic idea when it comes to the male gender role. This idea that the man is the head of the household, the man should take the lead in the relationship, and it's all about his emotional needs. And women must be submissive, and women have to make sure that he's taken care of. And men don't have to express their emotions. Men must be strong. Being strong means that you cut yourself off from your emotions, because obviously we are all born with emotions.
Yes.
And to want to cut off your own emotions is extremely toxic, extremely unhealthy. And of course, men pay the price for that, in terms of not being able to handle these intense emotional situations, like the breakup of a relationship. And they don't really know how to deal with it and see no other way out than to be violent. And that, of course, is the tragedy of gender-based violence in Namibia. So at a macro level, we need to look at patriarchy and have real discussions about the male gender role. And of course say to men that it's okay to have emotions, it's okay to cry, it's okay to have emotional intelligence, and of course at a micro level, people have to understand that you don't own someone if you are in an intimate relationship with that person. The person does not become your property. A healthy relationship is an equal relationship where we meet each other halfway, we look at our emotional needs. It can't be about the emotional needs of the man only. It will never work for women, so that old expectation of women sacrificing themselves and staying in a toxic relationship no longer makes any sense. So yes, we have a long way to go in terms of overcoming some of those mindsets, and really, teaching men in particular about what it means to be healthy emotionally. When we speak about mental health, it's for me first and foremost about emotional well-being. It's about being okay emotionally, and of course you need certain conditions for that. You need to have a good support network, you need to have loved ones, you need to have close friends, but also you need to have a healthy lifestyle. So we need to be speaking about mental health in that broader context of being emotionally okay, and what does it mean to be emotionally okay, and also with it, of course, lifestyle. For me, the conversation in mental health has shifted so much, and it's so welcome for me. That it has shifted now again in terms of we understand now that depression, mental health is not about chemical imbalances in the brain. And so then the question becomes, what is it all about? It's first and foremost about social relationships. There's no doubt about that. We are social beings. It's first and foremost about that. And what does that mean? What are those healthy relationships? And men need to learn to express their emotions. I very often say to men, your partner, your intimate partner, is the one person you cannot be quiet with. This is the one person you should be talking about, about your emotions, what your day was like, because that is how you keep your relationship going. So it's tough for the introverts when it comes to that kind of thing, but of course it's crucial in terms of managing your relationship very well. And of course lifestyle, as you know, in Namibia, because of our history of trauma, we've had more than a century of trauma in this country. We really deal with massive amounts of trauma. And certainly for me, we are not, having enough conversations about trauma. What has it done to us as a nation? And what must we do to try to deal with this better? At the moment, people are left on their own with alcoholism, drug abuse, all kinds of addictive behaviors. That is so destructive, not only to them but to the nation as a whole. And so we definitely need, when we speak about mental health, besides the suicide issue, I think we need to speak about trauma as well. There's been some really good developments in our field. we accept now that, like I said, these things, these mental health issues are not caused by chemical imbalances. So what are they caused by? There's this psychiatrist in Boston, he's Bessel van der Kolk, and he's written this brilliant book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's about trauma. It's about how the body remembers trauma. His view is that people become disconnected from their own bodies. Because it applies especially to men in terms of not being expressive about emotions, you know. So the body keeps the score. So what does it mean for Namibians? Does it mean that we all have this tremendous tension in our bodies? Yes, definitely. That's what it means. And how do we overcome that? Van der Kolk speaks about yoga, for example, as a possible solution to all that body tension that we keep within ourselves. So should we have yoga classes in our schools? Should we have yoga classes in our communities? What do? You know, we definitely, I certainly think we should reintroduce physical education in our schools. So we need to ask other questions about mental health. There's another interesting Canadian physician, Gabor Mate, has written a book where he talks about hungry ghosts. And the hungry ghosts are people who have been dispossessed, people who have been oppressed, who have this emotional emptiness, this emotional hollowness, and they deal with it through addiction, through alcoholism, through drug abuse. And once again, how do you overcome that emotional emptiness? You know, how do you help people in terms of overcoming this trauma, in terms of moving forward? So the question is, what are the alternatives? There's another interesting British psychologist called Patrick Holford, who has written extensively on the importance of nutrition, for example, and being able to feed the human brain so that the brain can function properly. And it's very relevant in terms of some of these serious psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia, for example. There's a very clear link between schizophrenia and lack of vitamin B, for example, or special children. You know, one of my real interests is special children. And one of the reasons for that is that special children have so much to teach us about how the human brain functions.
What are those special children? What is that?
Special children with autism,
with conditions.
Special needs children.
Okay,
you know, people with autism, for example, Down syndrome kids. There's so much we can learn there in terms of how the human brain functions, you know. So the nutrition part of it, you know, once again being able to feed the brain properly. There's some interesting research that about 40% of kids born with cesarean section are definitely at the risk of developing autism. So there's a whole range of things we can really learn in the mental health field in terms of, you know, how the brain functions, but also in terms of how we should intervene.
Absolutely. We go for a break and then return with Dr. Whittaker.
Neo Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
The conversation continues on the evening review with Dr. Shaun Whittaker. Now, Doc, address me on alcoholism, because it is our national favorite pastime, especially young people. But how much damage is it doing to us, especially from a mental health point of view?
It's a huge concern because it is so destructive to us as a nation, to our communities. It's a massive problem, and we really need to be able to find solutions. There was an interesting study done in Iceland, and they reintroduced, because they were worried about their young people drinking so much, and they reintroduced physical education in their schools, and the levels of alcoholism came down among young people. You know, so once again, for me, that is one of the solutions we should be looking at quite seriously. We need to get our young people into a healthy lifestyle. I think that is how you save young people. You get them into sports, you get them into some physical activity. So give them a different focus in life, you know, and for them to appreciate their own bodies much more and understand how destructive, you know, alcohol. I mean, alcohol is a poison. We need to say that very clearly to our young people, that we don't want them to destroy themselves in that way. You know, we are such a small population, and we need everyone. And if we are going to build a healthy society, we need to do away with some of these really toxic practices. So we need to educate them about alcohol, about drugs, about cigarettes as well. You know, so physical education is a possible solution, but also, you know, I hope that we could have life skills teachers in all our schools. For me, that's important. And of course, to continue to have these kinds of conversations on programs like this. I can tell you, when I started out in Namibia 25 years ago, the stigma, the misconceptions were much worse. I think we've made wonderful progress. We're not there yet, but at least we are making progress by having these kinds of conversations.
Do you think that that the responsibility to get this thing right has been left too much to people like yourselves in the field, in the medical field, and forget in the process that there are also political, socio-political roles that others can play who are not in your field? For example, you spoke about, you know, distracting young people from drinking by putting them more into social things like sport and whatnot. And then you're told we have no stadiums in our country, for example, you know. So there's someone else other than doctors who ought to have taken care of that aspect. Same as jobs, that, you know, when people are unemployed, there are people specifically in our country who are the custodian of that responsibility to say, we give you the responsibility to create jobs, to create investment in the country, get people off the streets. And therefore, do you think that therefore that more people must come to the party?
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, okay, for soccer fanatics like me, yes, of course. I mean, I think we should have good soccer programs in all our primary schools, you know, and yes, and I think that the role modeling aspect is very important. Can't only be from a few people. We need to have coaches. We need to have a much broader group of people involved with our young people, you know, from early on. Like I said, get them into sports, get them into a healthy lifestyle, but it needs to be widespread. You know, we need to at all levels, and it can be done. I mean, if you look at what has happened in some of the other countries, you know, they obviously start at primary school level, and eventually, you know, they do well in terms of their national soccer teams, for example. So, and I think that's a recipe that we obviously should be following as well. So yes, look, that whole role modeling aspect is so crucial to our young people. They look up to that primary school teacher. They look up to the coach. You know, they look up to that favorite uncle or that grandfather. You know, so we need to be speaking to everyone about their responsibility and setting a good example to young people, because ultimately children do what we do. You know, not what we say to them, but what we do. And especially, I think, as men, we have to be mindful of that. The kind of example we set, you know, to all the young men out there, and say to them, show them through our actions, you know, that there is a healthy way to do this.
In terms of intimate relationships, you know, we now have debates, people saying, yeah, you know, there must be DNA tests now for children's paternity linkages and whatnot, because trust seems to have also slowed down. You know, it's your partner, she's expecting. I mean, on this platform a couple of months ago, I had a men who came here saying, you know, they were given children that biologically were not theirs and stuff like that. Do you think things like social media, you know, they're just a wave of things that can lead to this distrust, and this distrust can have impact on mental health and can have fatal consequences?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, you know, there was this unfortunate incident 2 or 3 months ago, you know, where this man discovered that I think two of the children were not his. And it is obviously quite tragic, and it's the kind of thing that one would like to prevent. Although I must admit, my view is that I think we have to be careful about it, that we don't insult women, that we don't take this too far, you know, that we put women under the spotlight. When men, you know, we've had these double standards for so long. And the men get away with this kind of thing so easily, you know, they don't pay maintenance, they don't have to be involved with the kids, and nothing really happens to them. I mean, my view is that the maintenance that people pay in this country is, of course, completely inadequate. And too many men get away with it by simply saying, look, I don't have a job, I can't, and you know, and the onus is so often on the women to prove that, you know, he has an income and this is his income. And so I think this whole debate, for me, I think we have to be careful. Because we really have, and I think it's this patriarchal aspect, that we have these double standards, that we are, you know, we are quick to judge women, we are quick to, you know, to put them under the spotlight. And a lot of these things men have been getting away with for so long, you know. So yes, of course, we need to have the conversation, but I'm hoping that it will be a balanced conversation, in the sense that we could get men to take responsibility, you know, to look after the kids, to be involved in their lives. I mean, it's especially this role modeling thing that we are talking about. A lot of it is about men being absent, you know, men not being involved in raising the children and setting good examples as well. You know, to go with the kids to the sports field and to set a good example, you know, watch soccer together instead of going away with his buddies and drinking every weekend. So yes, of course, this issue of DNA testing is an important issue, because of course it's easier nowadays, you know, through a blood test. But at the same time, I think we have to be careful that we don't turn it into another patriarchal discussion.
Very important. It's a very, very important observation there, Doc. As we close this conversation, Doc, what is it that must happen now going forward for our country? Because clearly we have a crisis. The numbers are staggering lately. Of course, like we said in the beginning, you know, it could be due to so many things that are happening now. But there ought to be some ways now to say the interventions, especially these multi-sectoral interventions, as opposed to leaving everything to people like yourself to deal with these problems.
Okay, for me, the first is to say that our mental health legislation, what I understand is that there is, you know, new mental health legislation in Parliament, in the pipeline, and hopefully that will, you know, get through Parliament eventually, and that the human rights aspect will be emphasized in terms of this. Secondly, you know, that when it comes to mental health, when it comes to the social disintegration that we see, it's about unemployment, you know, so we need jobs. I mean, that's the short answer to that. On a different level, yes, I think we need to invest more in terms of mental health campaigns. I mean, I've said for a very long time that we need to have a suicide prevention center in Namibia. It can't be very expensive to set up something like that. You know, you have that in so many other countries. Suicide prevention center, people call a toll-free number, and you keep them on the phone, you do counseling over the phone. If needs be, there could be a follow-up. We have a network of social workers in the country, you know. So there's a lot that we can do. I certainly believe quite strongly that we could use our social workers to do psychoeducational workshops in the community. It's for me such a waste to have people, you know, sit in the offices when we could be doing so much more in terms of going out into communities, high schools in particular, and do workshops on a range of very important issues. Not only suicide, but alcoholism, drug abuse, a whole range of it. I mean, on a weekly basis, I get requests from schools and everywhere to come and speak about certain topics. But we do have a network that could be doing some of these things on a consistent basis as well.
Absolutely. Doc, it was such a pleasure having you on the platform.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, that's Dr. Sean Whittaker. He's a clinical psychologist sharing with us his perspectives, professional perspectives for that matter, on how we can counter some of the problems that our society face today in the context of mental health and other things. Thank you for watching.